The grand ballroom of Ashworth Manor gleamed beneath the weight of 1,000 crystal chandeliers, each prism catching the firelight and scattering it like flecks of frozen gold across the polished marble floors. Outside, the November rain fell in relentless sheets, tapping insistently against the tall windows, a cold percussion that harmonized with the low murmur of silk-clad guests. Lady Evelyn Marchmont stood at the edge of the assembly, poised and still, as though she were a painting framed by the carved doorway rather than a participant in its society. The gown she wore, a delicate shade of dove gray, hugged her form with such elegant restraint that even the untrained eye might have deemed it perfect. But perfection, she knew, drew attention with a double edge. Some admired, some resented. Tonight, the latter would find their voice. A whisper rose near the grand staircase, barely audible at first, then picked up like a brush fire. "Do you see her?" Standing there as if the room itself must bow to her. A clipped laugh followed. Another voice, velvet and venom, added, "Flawless, yes, but so brittle. She'll shatter before the season ends." Evelyn's fingers tightened against the fan she had not yet opened. The words, though veiled in polite laughter, cut like a rapier. Her chest ached with the familiar weight of scrutiny, each glance an invisible tally of her perceived faults. She had been prepared for society's fickle judgment, but anticipation did little to dull the sting. Across the ballroom, Lord Adrian Blackwood observed her with the precision of a man trained in both diplomacy and restraint. His dark attire, a tailored coat of deepest midnight, trimmed with the faintest glimmer of embroidery, contrasted starkly with the muted candlelight, and yet it was not his dress that drew eyes, it was the quiet gravity of his gaze. He had not yet approached, nor would he. He never rushed the vulnerable. Instead, he allowed himself to study her from afar, noting the way her shoulders held their line under the weight of countless invisible expectations, the subtle tension in her hands, the measured blink that betrayed her awareness of the crowd's predation. A misstep, or what society deemed one, occurred when a distant cousin of Evelyn's leaned too close, lowering her voice to mock the lady of the hour. "Such poise," the cousin said, a hint of malice in her smile, "for one so young. How very strained." Evelyn's jaw stiffened. She had mastered a polite nod for such encounters, a delicate exercise in maintaining dignity while absorbing the sting of ridicule. Yet the moment was made worse by the laughter that followed, quiet but sharp, like the scraping of chairs across marble, echoing through the high hall. Evelyn turned her gaze toward the orchestra balcony, where a quartet of violins and a harpist filled the air with music as soft as mist. The notes should have comforted her, yet they only underscored the isolation she felt, the sense that she was an actress performing in a play she had not written. She pressed her fan to her lips, a fragile shield, as she scanned the room and noted how every whisper seemed to carry her name. She had been the season's flawless lady in reputation and appearance, yet here, amid the grandeur, she felt every inch of the scrutiny like a hand pressed firmly to her chest. From the corner of the room, a gentleman approached, his steps careful, deliberate. He bowed with a flourish, and his words were measured. "Lady Evelyn, may I have the honor of this dance?" The voice was polite, the gesture proper, yet there was an undertone, an unspoken dare to accept or reject. Evelyn's heart fluttered. A dance meant to display grace could also expose weakness, a fact she knew far too well. She inclined her head slightly, accepting, aware of the audience's gaze like a tide pressing upon her. Every step to the center of the ballroom felt like walking across ice, polished and thin beneath her delicate slippers. The music swelled, filling the chamber with warmth that belied the chill of rain outside. As they moved, Evelyn felt the tension in her back ease just enough to let the mechanical memory of dance guide her. Her body a conduit of elegance, even as her mind raced with every possibility of misstep. Yet, in a flash, a careless comment floated across the room, audible to all who cared to listen. "She dances well, but with such desperation, as if she fears she will fall." The words struck her with the force of stones. Her cheeks warmed, not from exertion, but from shame, a vivid heat that painted every sense. Lord Adrian Blackwood, still observing, stiffened imperceptibly. The subtle curling of his lip betrayed no surprise, only calculation. He had long since recognized the delicate interplay of society's admiration and cruelty, and he knew it was not the laughter of the ignorant that could harm her, but the perception that she feared them. Tonight, he resolved, he would not intrude. He would not yet cross the threshold that propriety demanded. But he could watch. He could note. And, in the silent ledger of observation, he could mark her resilience. As the dance ended, Evelyn curtsied with perfect poise, meeting the gaze of her audience, aware that her every expression was catalogued for later conversation. The whispers continued, subtle and unrelenting, brushing against her like winter wind. And yet, for the first time, she felt a flicker of something she had not allowed herself in public before, a sense of recognition, as if a solitary witness had seen past the veneer of her social performance to the fragile truth beneath. The acknowledgment was quiet, almost imperceptible, but it was there. In the tilt of a head, the shadowed depth of an eye, the silent communion that passed between two people amid a room full of judgment. The storm outside had strengthened, and the rain's drumbeat against the tall windows became a rhythm to which the ballroom itself seemed to pulse. Evelyn stepped back toward the edge of the gathering, retreating not in defeat, but in contemplation. Her chest rose and fell with a mixture of relief and lingering tension, a fragile dignity reclaimed from the assault of gossip. Yet the ache remained, the ache of knowing that admiration and condemnation were often inseparable in her world, and that the one man whose attention mattered most would not yet cross the space between them. A candle flickered, casting long shadows along the parquet floor, and for a brief moment Evelyn felt as though the room had contracted and expanded at once, intimate and suffocating, beautiful and cruel. She had survived the first storm of whispers, the first public test of her resilience. And yet, just beyond the glittering crowd, a presence lingered, a measure of patience, a gaze unwavering, a quiet calculation that promised both intrigue and danger. The Duke had watched, he had noted, and in his silent vigilance, he had rendered a judgment she could neither see nor escape. And so she stood, the season's flawless lady, cloaked in silks and shadow, aware that the dance had ended but the scrutiny had not, that her grace had preserved her dignity, but the storm had only begun, and the one man who could alter everything watched still, as silent and inscrutable as the winter night pressing against the manor's windows. The morning after the ball, Ashworth Manor lay quiet beneath a sky streaked with bruised grey clouds. Rain had softened the gardens into a palette of muted green, petals slick with moisture, each leaf bowed as though burdened by the weight of gossip. Lady Evelyn Marchmont moved through the corridors with measured grace, the rustle of her gown the only sound, though her mind buzzed with whispers from the previous night. Each curt glance and hushed comment replayed like a refrain, a melody she could not silence. Yet there was another note, one far subtler, that lingered in her thoughts, the unwavering gaze of Lord Adrian Blackwood. A servant entered with a small, delicately carved box. Evelyn's pulse quickened. The ribbon binding it was of deep sapphire silk, a hue she had noticed in the Duke's eyes on more than one occasion. She lifted the lid, revealing a single white camellia, flawless in its simplicity. Nestled beside it was a note, the handwriting elegant and exacting, "For beauty beyond measure, though not mine to claim." Her breath caught. It was both an acknowledgment and a warning, a gesture at once intimate and socially proper. She turned the flower in her hands, the petals cool and trembling beneath her touch, wondering how such a declaration could emerge without scandal, yet carry the weight of inevitability. Society, however, was seldom patient with subtleties. By luncheon, whispers had traveled, as relentless and precise as a clock's chime. At the drawing-room window, Evelyn overheard two ladies, their voices dripping with polite venom. "A gift from a secret admirer," one ventured, feigning ignorance. "How audacious, and yet how improper," the other replied, fingers tracing the lace of her gloves as if to shield herself from scandal by touch alone. Evelyn's lips curved in a careful, almost imperceptible smile. The act was innocent by the letter of decorum, but everyone who witnessed it could interpret it otherwise, and the thrill of control, or danger, made her pulse quicken. Later, in the gardens, she encountered the Duke at the far end of the rose arbor. He moved as silently as the autumn mist curling around the paths, his presence both a comfort and a challenge. "You enjoy these morning hours alone, Lady Evelyn?" His tone was formal, yet threaded with warmth, the type of restraint that only heightened curiosity. She inclined her head politely, noting the way the sunlight caught the glint of his cufflinks and the shadows that danced along his cheek. "I find them honest," she said, choosing her words with care. A reprieve from the watchful eyes indoors. The subtle play of light and shadow, the drip of lingering rain from the rose leaves, made the moment feel suspended, as though the world outside these hedges did not exist. Yet society waited, always, to intrude upon even the smallest intimacies. Evelyn sensed it with every turn of her wrist, every careful bow of her head. A scandal, minor in origin but explosive in consequence, arrived shortly after. A maid, careless in her observations, had allowed the echo of a private conversation to slip into drawing-room gossip. Evelyn and the Duke had merely discussed a borrowed book, the title insignificant, yet the interpretation was instantaneous. By afternoon tea, the rumor had mutated. The Duke had requested a private meeting, alone, in the garden with Lady Evelyn, surely a breach of etiquette. Evelyn's pulse quickened at the thought of how quickly propriety could twist into peril. The phrase haunted her as she sipped her tea, the elegant phrasing of scandal, society's sharpened knife cloaked in velvet and charm. Yet amidst the peril, there were subtle signs of admiration, gestures that spoke volumes without words. A silken glove left upon a table, a carefully placed rose upon a balcony railing, a note slipped between the pages of a library book. Each interaction was a deliberate game, a careful navigation of propriety and desire. Evelyn's heart fluttered at the attention, but her mind remained alert. She knew that any misstep could transform fascination into condemnation. Still, a part of her longed to step beyond the invisible line, to allow a glance or a touch to speak where society forbade speech. The Duke, for his part, maintained the facade of rigid composure. In the presence of others, he was the perfect gentleman, controlled, measured, aloof. Yet when they passed one another in halls or across the gardens, there was a current that neither could deny. The faintest hesitation in a bow, the briefest meeting of eyes, a word chosen to hint at a private understanding, all carried significance far beyond their polite surface. Each gesture, seemingly innocent, was loaded with meaning, a clandestine language built for those who knew how to read it. By evening, Evelyn found herself walking the terrace alone, the wind tugging at her skirts and lifting stray strands of hair across her face. She pressed the camellia to her chest, inhaling its delicate fragrance, the memory of the Duke's note burning quietly in her mind. The city below glittered with gaslight, the sound of distant carriages mingling with the occasional clatter of hooves on cobblestones. It felt as if the world itself held its breath, awaiting the outcome of this delicate dance between admiration and peril. A movement in the shadows drew her attention, a flash of dark fabric at the far edge of the terrace. The Duke had followed, silent as ever, yet present in a way that made her heart tighten with anticipation. "Lady Evelyn," he said, his voice low, respectful, carrying an authority that made even the wind seem to pause. "The season is long, and the games of society longer still. I hope you do not find them exhausting." His eyes, dark and unreadable, flicked toward the city lights before returning to her. There was warmth there, but also the unmistakable barrier of duty and decorum. "I am accustomed to them," she replied, her voice steady though her pulse betrayed her. "Yet I admit, there are moments when the weight of expectation feels nearly unbearable." She dared not reveal the fluttering hope that had taken root in her chest, nor the growing fascination she felt for the silent observer who had marked her resilience with such care. For a brief moment, they simply regarded one another, the space between them heavy with unspoken possibilities and restrained longing. Then, a carriage door slammed below in the courtyard, a reminder of the world beyond the terrace, of society's ever-watchful gaze. Evelyn adjusted her gloves, straightened her posture, and allowed the moment to pass, carrying the camellia with her as both shield and promise. The Duke retreated to the shadows, leaving her with the echo of his presence and the certainty that the season's games had only begun. As she returned to the manor, the faint light of candles flickered through the drawing-room windows. Evelyn's heart carried both relief and anticipation, her mind alive with possibilities that propriety could neither allow nor forbid. And somewhere, in the silent space between admiration and danger, she sensed the first true spark of something that might, in time, become far more perilous, and infinitely more intoxicating, than she had ever imagined. The garden at Ashworth Manor was hushed in the late afternoon, bathed in the amber glow of a waning sun that set the rain-washed leaves alight with fleeting fire. Mist clung to the hedgerows and fountains, curling in ghostly spirals around the statues of forgotten ancestors. Lady Evelyn Marchmont walked along the gravel path, the soft scrape of her slippers muffled by the damp earth, a delicate cadence that seemed too fragile for the grandeur surrounding her. She carried the camellia from the morning's gift, petals slightly bent as though burdened with significance. Every step she took was measured, aware that even solitude could carry echoes of judgment. A shadow detached itself from the latticework at the edge of the rose arbor. Lord Adrian Blackwood emerged, his coat still dark, his presence both imposing and careful. He did not startle her. They had grown accustomed to the silent rhythm of each other's movements, the way anticipation preceded contact like an unspoken contract. "Lady Evelyn," he began, bowing ever so slightly, "I trust the morning's air has been merciful." His tone, formal yet tender, betrayed a subtle warmth, an invitation to a dialogue that dared not breach the proprieties of society. "I would call it reflective," she replied, curving her fingers around the stem of the camellia. "The gardens speak differently when no eyes are upon them, and the world beyond these hedges seems distant." Her words floated softly, the tip of each syllable catching in the delicate autumn breeze. For a moment, they merely regarded one another, standing beneath the golden haze of sunlight, the mist curling about them like a curtain drawn against the judgment of society. Evelyn's heart quickened, not with fear but with a delicate thrill of attention that was wholly and dangerously hers. She felt the weight of every glance, every unspoken word, yet in this private hour, the world's prying eyes were absent, replaced by the sharp, piercing awareness of one man's steady regard. "I have observed your resilience," Adrian said, his voice low, careful, yet bearing the subtle force of sincerity. "It is extraordinary. I have seen others falter under far less scrutiny, and yet you—" He paused, searching for a phrase that would not overstep. His gaze softened as it met hers, as if measuring the distance between admiration and desire. "You endure." Evelyn's breath caught. The acknowledgment, spoken aloud, was more dangerous than any whispered insult. It carried intimacy disguised as observation, a rare and forbidden proximity that left her poised on the edge of propriety. She inclined her head in silent gratitude, aware of the rapid, almost imperceptible shift in the air between them. For the first time, she sensed that the game of gestures, rumors, and discreet admiration had evolved into something infinitely more personal, a delicate, intoxicating admission of connection. "I have endured," she said softly, choosing her words with care, "because there is little choice but to preserve one's dignity. Yet one grows weary of performance, and weary of expectation. It is not always easy to maintain such grace." Her voice trembled only slightly, betraying the inner vulnerability she had long hidden from the world. Adrian's eyes darkened, a shadow of sympathy and restrained desire passing across his features. "Grace is easier when observed by one who truly understands its cost," he replied. "And yet, even I am limited. I am bound by duty, by the expectations of society, by the eyes that follow every action." His hand hovered for the briefest moment, as if extending a promise too dangerous to claim, then retreated to his side. Evelyn felt the weight of his restraint more keenly than the absence of touch. It was as though the space between them carried the full measure of possibility, an invisible bridge strung taut with desire and propriety. She took a step closer, careful to respect the invisible line that separated admiration from scandal, longing from impropriety. "And yet," she whispered, "there are moments when one longs to step beyond the line, if only for an instant, to be known not by duty or decorum, but as oneself." Adrian's lips curved, the faintest trace of a smile, as he replied, "To be truly known, that is the peril and the promise." His voice fell lower, threading each syllable with meaning. "Yet I am ever watchful, and ever constrained. My actions must reflect honor, even as my heart rebels." A hush fell upon the garden, as though the world itself had paused to witness the fragile exchange. Leaves rustled gently, the distant fountain murmured in silver tones, and the scent of autumn roses mingled with the earthy perfume of rain-soaked soil. Evelyn's hand grazed the petals of the camellia, as if drawing courage from its delicate perfection. She felt the pulse of possibility, the rhythm of quiet daring that made every breath charged with unspoken truths. "You speak as though I might understand," she said softly, her gaze unwavering. "And perhaps I do. Or perhaps I simply see what must remain unspoken." Her words carried both surrender and defiance, an acknowledgment of the dangerous intimacy threading through their encounter. Adrian's gaze held hers, long, deliberate, magnetic. "I see," he murmured, the weight of propriety pressing against the undeniable pull of sentiment. "And I am constrained only by the world that watches." You, Lady Evelyn, have already claimed a measure of my attention, yet I must tread lightly, lest my desire become indiscretion. For a heartbeat, the air seemed to quiver between them, each inhalation a fragile thread of longing. Evelyn's pulse quickened, her fingers brushing the camellia's stem, a silent plea for understanding, a testament to the precarious balance between propriety and yearning. The garden became a realm apart, suspended in golden haze and mist, a sanctuary for confessions that dared not yet be spoken aloud. Then, faint and sudden, the sound of the manor's gates closing echoed through the hedges, a reminder that society, with its relentless observation, could intrude at any moment. Evelyn straightened, regaining her composure, her dignity preserved though her heart trembled. Adrian inclined his head with a measured, silent acknowledgment, retreating slowly into the shadows of the arbor, leaving her with the awareness of the connection they shared, delicate and perilous. She watched him go, her heart both burdened and buoyed, knowing that this private communion had changed everything. The season's games, the social dances, and the veiled gestures now bore a new weight. Every whispered note, every discreet gift, every glance across the ballroom held the echo of this afternoon, of words spoken in restraint yet saturated with meaning. Evelyn turned toward the house, camellia in hand, and allowed herself a single, quiet exhale. The encounter had shifted the balance of her world, revealing a path lined with danger, desire, and the rare, exquisite possibility of understanding. She knew the season's scrutiny had not ended, but a seed of hope had taken root, fragile, tender, and irrevocable. And somewhere in the labyrinth of shadowed paths, hidden gazes, and society's watchful eyes, she sensed the silent promise of what might yet come, the quiet storm of longing that had begun between her and the Duke, waiting for the next moment when restraint might falter, and truth could finally be spoken. The ballroom of Ashworth Manor shimmered once more beneath the brilliance of crystal chandeliers, though tonight their light seemed softer, warmer, as if bending to the mood of expectation. Lady Evelyn Marchmont entered with a measured elegance that had become her armor, each step along the polished parquet deliberate, yet betraying the subtle tremor of anticipation that ran beneath her composed exterior. The season's most influential families had gathered, their eyes wide with curiosity, and perhaps a whisper of suspicion. Every glance, every murmur, seemed magnified beneath the cavernous ceiling. Lord Adrian Blackwood stood at the far side of the room, the perfect model of composure, yet there was a subtle tension in his posture, a quiet storm barely contained beneath the smooth surface of dignity. His eyes found Evelyn immediately, and for a fraction of a heartbeat, the vast expanse of the ballroom disappeared. Each chandelier prism reflected the dark depth of his gaze, and for her, it was as though every whispered scandal, every stolen glance, every discreet token exchanged over weeks coalesced into a single, undeniable presence. A delicate hush fell over the space as music rose, and the quartet began a waltz of measured grandeur. Evelyn's hands clutched her fan with an almost imperceptible tightness. It was both shield and talisman. Her heartbeat thrummed against her ribs like the echo of a distant drum. Adrian's lips curved in the faintest acknowledgment of the unspoken. Tonight, society would watch, and yet there existed the possibility of asserting a truth beyond the reach of gossip. The moment arrived almost imperceptibly. Adrian crossed the distance between them with the precision of a man who had mastered patience, stopping a mere foot from her poised frame. "Lady Evelyn," he said, voice low, formal, yet charged with subtle warmth, "may I have the honor of this dance?" The words were simple, conventional, but the intent behind them was incandescent, carrying decades' worth of propriety and desire in a single bow of the head. She inclined her head, curtsying with grace that belied the quickening of her pulse. The music swelled, filling the grand hall with a rhythm that mirrored the quiet surge of her anticipation. As their hands met, there was no need for a whisper. The pressure of his palm, firm yet considerate, spoke volumes. Every step, every turn, became a silent declaration, a private conversation encoded in the language of measured proximity and gentle restraint. Eyes followed them. Whispers rose like a tide, a murmur threading through the assembly. Did the Duke choose her? Was this the first dance? But the elegance of their performance rendered speculation impotent. The world's scrutiny pressed against them, yet they moved as though above it, two souls negotiating intimacy amid the vigilant eyes of society. Every turn of the dance, every tilt of the head, was a negotiation of propriety and desire, a deliberate balance between what could be shown and what must remain veiled. Evelyn's thoughts raced even as her body followed the choreography of the waltz. She recalled the camellia, the stolen notes, the hushed conversations in gardens and libraries, and the momentary glimpses of Adrian's humanity hidden beneath the veneer of control. Tonight, she realized, was the culmination, not merely of gestures and tokens, but of the emotional ledger they had been building in private, each moment weighting the other with significance. Adrian's voice, meant only for her, brushed her ear as they passed beneath the chandeliered arch. "You move with grace beyond measure. It is remarkable to see poise tempered with the quiet strength that defines you." The words were both praise and acknowledgement, a careful declaration crafted to meet the scrutiny of society while honoring their private truth. Evelyn's breath hitched imperceptibly. Every syllable was a tether to the bond they had nurtured in shadows. A subtle shift occurred when another lady approached, ostensibly to observe, yet inadvertently providing the Duke an opening. He placed his gloved hand lightly at the small of Evelyn's back, a gesture that was socially acceptable yet undeniably intimate. The subtle closeness, the warmth of his presence, sent a ripple of awareness through her spine. Society may have seen only the dance. She saw the admission, the silent defiance of propriety in the safest measure possible. Music swelled again, and with it, the height of their declaration. Adrian's gaze locked with hers across a turn of the hall, his eyes dark, magnetic, and full of unspoken promises. He lowered his voice to a level only she could hear. "Tonight, every shadow, every whisper, every expectation, none of it matters beyond this moment. You are yours, if only for the measure of this dance." Her hand, light against his, betrayed the faintest tremor. "And what of the world beyond these walls?" she asked, her tone steady, though her chest fluttered with excitement. "Will it allow us this acknowledgement?" Adrian's reply was measured, a whisper threaded with gravity and devotion. "The world may watch, Lady Evelyn, but it cannot claim what it does not understand. Our hearts, unseen by judgment, know the truth." The assembly had become background, a soft hum to the private intensity shared between them. Every glance, every touch of the hand, every small motion conveyed volumes, a declaration not in words, but in presence, in restraint, in carefully measured intimacy. The scandal that had hovered at the periphery of their courtship became irrelevant here, within the measured choreography of dance and silence. As the final notes of the waltz lingered like the scent of crushed roses, Adrian led Evelyn to a quiet alcove at the edge of the ballroom. Candlelight flickered, illuminating the delicate planes of her face and casting shadows across his own features. He did not speak at first. Silence was sufficient, each heartbeat a testament to the declaration that had passed between them. Then, with deliberate gentleness, he extended the camellia she had received days prior, now pressed between gloved fingers, a symbol of the continuity of his attention and care. "Accept this," he said, his voice low, formal, yet intimate, "not as society's token, nor as a performance, but as proof that what begins in whispers and shadows may endure in the quiet of truth." Evelyn's fingers brushed the flower, delicate and trembling, and the acknowledgment in that touch was a communion deeper than any spoken vow. Around them, the ballroom continued in a haze of light and murmurs, yet they existed in a small orbit apart, each aware that society might interpret their gesture incorrectly, yet powerless to diminish its significance. Here, propriety had been observed, dignity preserved, and the first public acknowledgment of private truth had been achieved. The moment was a triumph not only of restraint but of intimacy, a resolution that honored both hearts and reputation. And yet, even as she smiled, faint and radiant, a shadow passed across the terrace window beyond the ballroom doors, hinting at the lingering dangers of rumor and the persistent gaze of society. The declaration had been made, the resolution achieved, but the season's games had not ended. A storm of whispers and potential scandal awaited, and the hearts that had dared to declare truth knew that the next move could alter everything. Evelyn inhaled slowly, the camellia pressed to her chest, and felt both the exhilaration of triumph and the tremor of impending challenge. She had won a moment, carved a space for love within the rigid walls of propriety, and the Duke had stood beside her, unwavering, a presence both protective and magnetic. The waltz had ended, yet its echo lingered in the blood and bone of every spectator, in the glimmer of candlelight, in the shadowed corners of hearts not yet ready to understand. And somewhere, just beyond the reach of gilded walls, the next movement waited, the first sign that the quiet victory was but a prelude to a more profound reckoning, one that would test both courage and devotion in ways neither had yet imagined. The night air was crisp, carrying the scent of rain-washed gardens and the distant smoke of chimneys from Ashworth Manor. Lady Evelyn Marchmont walked along the terrace, her gown rustling softly with every measured step, the moonlight catching the pale folds of her dress, turning her into a vision of quiet luminosity. Inside, the manor hummed with music and laughter, the remnants of another ball echoing faintly, but she had sought the solitude of the gardens, where the world's eyes could not reach, and the heart's truth might breathe freely. A sudden movement drew her attention. A shadow detached itself from the arbor at the far edge, stepping into the silver wash of moonlight. Lord Adrian Blackwood approached, his presence as certain as the steady beat of her own pulse. He wore midnight, as always, but tonight his restraint carried a tension unlike any she had witnessed before. There was a gravitas in his step, a silent declaration in the very air he disturbed. "Lady Evelyn," he said, voice low, deliberate and resonant, "the hour grows late, yet propriety need not silence truth." Her lips curved faintly, a fragile acknowledgment. "And what truth demands attention at this hour?" she asked, though her heart answered before her tongue could form words. The wind teased loose strands of hair across her cheeks, and she brushed them back, aware of the intimacy of moonlight and shadow, aware of the distance between them that was yet immeasurably small. "I have watched," Adrian said, halting a mere foot from her, "watched the whispers, the games, the insinuations of a season bent on testing courage. And I have determined that my regard will not be measured by rumor nor constrained by the judgment of others." His eyes, dark and magnetic, held hers with an intensity that made the cool night tremble with heat. "Tonight, Lady Evelyn, I claim no more than the right to speak my heart and to know yours in return." A shiver ran along her spine, though whether from the night air or the force of his words she could not tell. Her fingers tightened on the camellia she carried, its petals now bearing the faint crease of many days' significance. "And what of propriety?" she whispered, the word tasting of both curiosity and caution. "What of the eyes that watch, the whispers that follow?" Adrian stepped closer, yet never intruded upon the space demanded by dignity. "Propriety is a chain," he said, voice hushed, "but even chains may be lifted when hearts align with courage. I would rather bear the judgment of truth than the deceit of silence. If I am to be bound, let it be by honor and devotion, not by fear or observation." The moonlight glimmered across his gloved hand, stretched toward her with deliberate intention, and Evelyn felt the stirrings of surrender in the careful space between them. She inhaled, the scent of damp earth and autumn leaves filling her senses, grounding her even as her heart soared. Every hesitation of the season, every whisper and slight, had led to this delicate precipice, where restraint met desire, where private truth demanded recognition. "You speak of courage," she murmured, voice trembling only slightly, "yet I fear the consequences of yielding. Society does not forgive as readily as hearts understand." Her gaze fell to the camellia in her hands, petals trembling as though sharing her uncertainty. "Yet I have long wished for honesty, even in the smallest measure." A soft, deliberate step closed the distance, and Adrian's hand brushed hers as he took the flower, the contact both electric and measured. "Honesty," he whispered, "is the only currency that endures when all else fails. And tonight, Lady Evelyn, I offer it without reservation, without pretense, without fear." His eyes bore into hers, steady and unwavering, a challenge and a promise all at once. Her chest rose and fell with quickened rhythm, yet her voice remained steady. "Then speak," she said, "and I shall answer, not with the caution of society, but with the truth of my heart." For a moment, silence reigned, the world beyond the terrace slipping into obscurity. The manor's distant music became background, a murmur beneath the thrum of their shared heartbeat. Then, with deliberate grace, Adrian lifted the camellia between them, pressing it lightly to her hand before resting it against his chest. "I have admired you in shadows and in whispers, Lady Evelyn. I have observed your strength, your patience, your dignity. I have wished to claim nothing that would endanger you, yet I cannot deny what my heart knows, that you are the one woman I cannot, and should not, ignore." Her breath caught, the words like warm sunlight piercing through the chill of doubt and propriety. The camellia trembled between them, a silent witness to the moment's gravity. "And if I were to admit," she murmured, "that I have long awaited such acknowledgment, would it not court danger?" "A measured danger," he replied, voice low and unwavering. but one that honors both hearts. I would rather face the season's whispers than a lifetime of silence, knowing what might have been. His gloved hand lifted to brush a stray curl from her cheek, gentle enough to observe decorum, intimate enough to convey devotion. Her fingers met his, the contact a trembling bridge between restraint and surrender. "Then we are agreed," she whispered, "that honesty and courage may guide us, even when the world would deny it." Adrian inclined his head, eyes dark and gleaming, a quiet triumph in the depths of restraint and longing. "We are agreed," he said, his voice carrying both reverence and triumph. "Tonight, Lady Evelyn, the season's games hold no sway over the truth between us." They stood thus, hand in hand, camellia between them, a delicate symbol of what had been cultivated in silence, shadows, and whispered notes. The moonlight softened their edges, painting them in hues of intimacy and dignity. Around them, the manor continued its faint hum, the echo of music and laughter serving only to undo the private victory achieved. And yet, even as they lingered in the shared certainty of hearts acknowledged, a distant carriage clattered across the cobblestones, a reminder that the world would continue to observe, to judge, to challenge. They were prepared now, fortified by honesty, devotion, and courage, their hearts aligned against the persistent tides of rumor and expectation. The season's scrutiny might not relent, but within this moment, within the tender orbit of hand and gaze, they had claimed something infinitely more enduring: the right to truth, the right to love, the right to hope. Evelyn inhaled, the camellia pressed to her chest once more, a quiet emblem of victory and promise. Adrian's presence beside her was steady, protective, magnetic, proof that propriety could coexist with passion, that restraint could give rise to fulfillment. For the first time, she felt the full measure of release from fear, the liberation of hearts speaking in tandem, the exhilaration of being known in ways society could not dictate nor diminish. As the night deepened and the first hints of dawn's chill crept across the garden, they turned together toward the manor, steps light with both triumph and anticipation. The season would continue, the whispers and glances would persist, but they had forged a bond neither rumor nor expectation could sever. In the silver glow of moonlight and the quiet of autumn gardens, the Duke and the season's flawless lady walked side by side, hearts aligned, courage intact, a delicate victory claiming its quiet, enduring place in the world.